And here we go. We are live. We'll give time. People usually they'll be joining in from the waiting room, but I think that for the purposes of this, we can get started right away. So for those of you that are joining or watching this afterwards, welcome to another market lesson. My name is Rick Barcelos. I am a HubSpot specialist here at Growth and the host of our micro lesson series. And today I have really exciting guest joining us. Alex Johnson. He is the master when it comes to newsletters, and he's going to tell you guys kind of all about that. So you guys are not here to hear from me. As always, you're here to hear from him. So Alex, please go ahead and take the stage, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. Very excited to be talking a little bit about the art and science of building a newsletter. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I'll start with just a really quick introduction for myself. I am a 20 plus year veteran of working in marketing and market research in financial services. So very familiar with the challenge of how do you build an audience? How do you create great thought leadership content that engages and keeps people coming back? More recently in my career, I'm the founder and creator of Fintech Takes, which is a newsletter, podcast, and online community for financial technology executives. What does that mean exactly? So Fintech Takes itself, we have more than 60,000 email subscribers. We have an average open rate of around 50 to 55%, which we're very proud of and something that we focus on a lot. And anecdotally, the newsletter is very widely read by executives in banking, startup founders, even the regulators who regulate the financial services space. So 60,000, not huge, pretty big. We're very proud of it. But the quality of the readership and the quality of the engagement that we've built over the last 5+ years is something that we're very proud of. And we've made plenty of mistakes along the way. And so what I thought I would do for today's discussion is just to walk through some of the lessons that we've learned. And really what I wanted to orient this discussion around is this question, which is, I think, a question on everyone's mind. How do you build sustained attention and engagement with a high value audience at a time when everyone is competing for the same thing? And I think it's worth pausing on this question just for a second because, well, I think we all know this in the abstract. It's worth just reinforcing that every single person in the world, their most valued resource and the resource that people compete the most for is their attention, right? And people have called this the attention economy. There's lots of other different words used to describe it. There's been lots of research done on it. But just anecdotally, I think we all know that, whether it's on a personal level where you're sort of fending off different social media companies that are competing for your attention versus video games versus streaming video versus any number of live events that are happening. And then the same thing is happening in our professional lives. We're all just under siege with content, with emails, with notifications, with apps that people want us to download. And attention is by far the most valuable commodity. And particularly when you're trying to market or reach a very high value audience, the competition just ratchets up tremendously, right? And it doesn't need to be a huge audience if the value of the audience, if the decision makers who are in that audience are ones who everyone wants to reach. And so the thing that I think we all struggle with is this question of not only how do we get someone's attention, because you can always get someone's attention. For a second, you can get someone's attention. If you set off a firework and it explodes, you're going to grab someone's attention. But as soon as that stops, their attention is going to wander and leave and go away. The question is, how do you keep their attention? How do you build an ongoing relationship with them? And what we've found is that a newsletter, as simple as it is, can be a very effective way to grab folks' attention. And earning a place in their inbox, I think, is one of the most privileged places that you can be. And again, it's a very busy place. We all have overflowing inboxes with spam and with all kinds of marketers trying to get our attention. So how do you earn a privileged place in that inbox? That's what we've really been focused on trying to figure out over the last 5+ years. And as I said, we've made pretty much every mistake in the book. And so I want to share some of the lessons that we've learned. Specifically, I have 5 pieces of advice for building a newsletter that can capture and sustain attention and engagement with a high value audience. All right, so the first one is consistency. And I think by far consistency is the most important lesson that I've taken away from writing the newsletter. I've been sending the Fintech Takes newsletter out on a regular basis since July of 2019. And in that time, I've never missed a send. I can tell you that that has not been easy. That's 350 consecutive weeks, give or take. And over those 350 consecutive weeks, my wife and I had 3 children who are now growing up. We have had deaths in the family. We've had vacations. We've had all kinds of stuff happen. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've been up late on a Sunday night, just like racking my brain for something to write and something to publish. And to be honest with you, I'm not the most consistent person just by nature. But for whatever reason, I've always been very hyper focused on delivering the newsletter consistency. I want it to be in someone's inbox on the same day and ideally at the same time every day. And what I've noticed about the value of consistency is that it actually doesn't really matter how frequently you do something if you can do it consistently. What's been fascinating is for the newsletter over the last 5 years, the frequency with which we publish it has actually changed quite a bit. I used to send in the early days when I first started, and this was me doing the newsletter as a little side gig where I wasn't getting paid, it wasn't making any money, and it was just literally a project that I was doing off the side of my desk. I would send it every other week, so twice a month on Mondays. And at the time, that felt like a huge imposition and something that was very, very difficult to, like, how am I going to come up with another newsletter to send? I can't believe I have to do this. But what was interesting was once we started getting into a consistent habit of sending it every other Monday, it started to become a bit of a habit for the folks who were reading it. And they started to become accustomed to the fact that a new thing was going to come from Alex, giving thoughts on what was happening in fintech. And whether they were aware of it or not, it sort of subconsciously seeped into their brain as a thing that they should expect to have happen. And I think all of our brains, we kind of have this like lizard brain somewhere buried deep inside that just is used to sort of like, oh, this is a source of something valuable that I get, and this is the consistency with which I get it. I can trust this. And over time, I can rely on this and turn this into a habit. And it was fascinating, actually. I remember in those days when I was sending it every other week, I sent out a survey to readers and I asked a bunch of questions about the newsletter. What do you like? What do you not like? And one of the questions I asked was, how are you enjoying the frequency of the newsletter? Do you want the newsletter like more frequently, less frequently, whatever? And I had multiple people who responded to that survey saying, oh no, every week is great. And I was like, every week? I don't send the newsletter every week. I send the newsletter every other week. But in their heads, they had assumed I was sending it every single week. And what that told me was the consistency had created a habit and a form of trust that in their heads, they just assumed I was sending it every week, even though I was sending it every other week. And the other thing that that taught me was people are busy, right? People have a ton of things going on in their lives. They have a ton of emails coming through their inbox. To be honest, not everyone reads every single newsletter as soon as I send it. That's insane. But they notice when the newsletter comes in. And as long as it's coming in on a consistent basis, it sort of becomes a scaffolding and a part of the world and a part of how they sort of structure their week to week professional lives and the time that they commit to different things. And having that position in someone's inbox is by far the most important thing. So even as we've ramped up the frequency of the newsletter over time, and we went from 1 every other week to doing 2 per week, which was a huge jump, to now what we do is 3 every single week, which is, I think, about the outer limits of what we're ever going to do, because you can't be in everyone's inbox every single day necessarily. But again, the thing I've taken from this lesson is consistency trumps everything. And if you can show consistency over time, you will start to see amazing results. All right. Second lesson is be interested. And I guess the sort of thing that's not written in the title, but that I was sort of hinting at is be interested. Don't try to be interesting. And here's what I mean by that. In my experience, at least, it is impossible to predict what others will find interesting. I have done this before. I've written newsletters where I was like, oh, this is a hot topic. Some of my competitors are writing about this. Everyone seems to care about this. I'm going to write something about this. And my intention going into it was I want to write something and people are going to read this and they're going to say, Alex is so smart. This is such a clever thing that he wrote. I'm so happy I subscribed to his newsletter. And I'm like almost preemptively patting myself on the back before I've sent the newsletter because I've picked a great topic that I know people are going to love because everyone is interested in it. Here we go. And then I write the newsletter, and I'm writing it with impure motivations because I'm writing it about something that I don't particularly care about and that wouldn't have naturally attracted me, but is something that I'm doing because I want to be popular. The content is not very good, and it just doesn't fail to capture people's attention. And I can't tell you the number of times I've made this mistake where I've tried to write something to be popular and it doesn't work well. And it doesn't work well because A, the content's not that good because I don't really care about it that much, and B, it's not very popular because a whole bunch of other people are writing about it. I have wandered into a very competitive topic where I'm just one among dozens of people who've written about agentic commerce or whatever the new topic du jour is at the moment, and I just don't have anything differentiated or interesting to say. It is much better, in my experience, to write about what you care about, what you genuinely find interesting. And the reason for that is twofold. One, it's better content. When you write something that you are deeply interested in, and I can't really even explain why this is the case, but like the audience can just tell your passion or interest in the topic just becomes infused in the words you choose, the examples you do, the level of research you do. Just it all comes through the screen. And when someone reads something that you're really passionate about, they can feel the passion coming through the screen and they respond to that and they go, well, Alex is interested in it. Maybe I should be interested in it. The other reason that it's really important to write something that you're passionate about and that you're curious about and that just you're obsessed over, honestly, is because it's much easier to hold up with that consistent habit that you're trying to create. Remember, consistency is the most important thing. And when you're trying to be consistent, it's much, much easier to be consistent when you are like, oh, I can't wait to write about this topic. And I can reference my own personal experience. The difference between being up late on a Sunday night, knowing you have a newsletter that has to go out on Monday, and writing it because it's a chore and you have to, but you don't have a good idea that you're passionate about, versus, oh, I can't wait to dig into this topic. I've had writing sessions that go 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, which I guess would be Monday morning, where I'm just firing away. My brain is completely active. I'm not in any way tired. And I get done and I'm like, this felt amazing. That is what you want to produce because that's what will draw you to the habit of writing a newsletter and staying consistent. And it also produces the best content. I have a couple examples here that I dropped on the screen. It can be anything, right? On the right, I wrote about mortgage servicing, which is truly the most boring topic in the world. There's only like 6 people who care about mortgage servicing, but I became one of them because I just found it really fascinating and I didn't understand it and I wanted to like better dig into what it meant. And so I just obsessively started writing about mortgage servicing. No one really cared at the beginning, but the more I wrote about it and the more I just sort of tried to convey why I found it interesting and exciting, it actually converted a lot of people in my audience to caring about it too. And to this day, it's one of the best performing pieces I've ever written. On the left is a much different example. I have written several newsletters comparing fintech companies to NBA players. Really just a thing I wanted to do because it's silly and I enjoy doing it. I'm a fan of basketball, so that was why I did it. I did not expect it to perform well. I was just like, you know what? I'm doing this for me. I have a newsletter. This is self-care. I'm going to do this for me. But what I found was after I published it, people were obsessed with it and they'd never seen something like that before. And they could tell that I put more time into it than I probably should have to get the comparisons exactly right. And that's another series of things I've written that have performed really well. So chasing topics you think will be interesting to others, no. Focusing on topics that you are interested in and passionate about, yes. Third lesson, be generous. I think one of the challenges with content marketing being such a mainstay of marketing strategies and a tool that all companies use today is that we've trained people to be very cautious about trusting anything that they get for free, including content. Everyone expects a sales pitch to be lurking around every single corner, every email you open, every white paper you download, every event you go to. There's this expectation that at any point you're going to get the rug pulled out from underneath you, and there's going to be a really horrific and boring and irrelevant sales pitch coming right at you. So the strategy is to just give away great content for free, and that's it. Don't do anything else. Just create great content, give it away for free, no sales pitch, no ask. Just do something for your audience because you think it's interesting and important. And that's really it. And again, I say this knowing what you are all up against, right? I worked in marketing for years and years and years. And I've always found that marketers have two brains, right? One brain is uh, this is something that's going to help our audience. Whether they buy from us or not, we shouldn't care. We should just give them this thing because we love them. And if they know that we love them and we are trying to just add value to their lives, that benefit will come back to us over time. That brand value will accrue to us over time. All marketers know that, but they have a second brain. And the second brain tells marketers, I have to get a return on this. I have to be able to show how every single, not just dollar I spend, but like unit of my time goes directly to an ROI that I can measure and that I can show on a report that I deliver to my boss next week. Candidly, I think performance-based marketing, particularly through like Google and social media applications, has really done us a bit of a disservice in that regard, because I think what it's done is it showed marketers like, hey, you can actually account for the ROI on every single dollar that you spend. Most marketing isn't that way. And in fact, some of the best marketing is really hard to measure an ROI on, but we know that it's valuable. And I think creating great content that is just utterly free of sales pitches or sort of marketing speak is the greatest gift that you can give to your customers, your prospects, your audience. And I will say, if you do that consistently and you're just like give, 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 then every once in a while, when you do have an ask, you can be fully transparent about it and your audience will understand. When I have an ask that I put in my newsletter, whether it's I want them to fill out a survey or I want them to go to an event, or I really think that this is a webinar that they should attend, or hey, here's an ad for a company that I really like and here's why, they respond to that because they know I don't ask much of them. And so the give to ask ratio and being just incredibly ridiculously generous, especially over a long period of time, accrues hugely in terms of brand value and trust back to you, but you have to be very rigorous about being generous. I will also say it's very important to play nicely with others in the ecosystem. I have lots of competitors, right? Other people who write newsletters on fintech, financial services. I could choose to treat them as the enemy, and I could be like, your content sucks, my content is the greatest, and have a very adversarial relationship. Oftentimes, I think my audience would probably enjoy that a little bit more. We like conflict. We like to watch reality TV to see people fight. So, like, there is a hunger for that, and it would be more satisfying to me, especially when I see some of my competitors do stuff where I'm like, I don't really like that. Instead of doing that, I treat content as a very non-zero sum game. I collaborate with my competitors all the time on content. Oh, hey, you're writing about that. I'm writing about that. What if we team up and do newsletters where we each like write someone else's newsletter for a time and we sort of like rotate between our audiences? Do you want to come on my podcast? I can come on your podcast. Maybe we can create a joint podcast together. Collaborating on content is better for the audience, it's better for the ecosystem, and it just sort of leans into this idea of being generous. And so would very much encourage, whether it's competitors to your company or just others in the ecosystem who are writing interesting things, reach out to them, collaborate with them. The best kind of content that I think audiences really actually do enjoy is content that's built on a deep well of like respect and collaboration with others in the ecosystem. Fourth piece of advice, be human. So Rick and I were talking about this before we started. AI is everywhere. And I think AI, one of the long-term effects of it is going to be the more human you are in your content, the better it's going to perform. I know from experience that content that comes from people outperforms content that comes from brands. So my content comes from me. It's from Alex Johnson. Every intro to every newsletter I write, at the bottom of the intro, it says Alex, from Alex, because I want them to know that it's written by me. Everything that comes out from Fintech Takes has had my eyeballs on it. I read every single thing. I write most of it. It comes from me. People trust people. They don't trust brands. They don't trust companies. It is much better to have a newsletter in your inbox from Alex Johnson than a newsletter from Fintech Takes or a newsletter from the media company that Fintech Takes is built on, which is a company called Workweek. People don't know who that is. You know, even like if you think about traditional media, you know, the New York Times is this big brand that is sort of faceless and impersonal. And that has some benefits, but a lot of people read the New York Times because of the individual writers and the bylines. People trust people. I'll also say it's really important to write like a human. Use idioms, use asides, use obscure pop culture references. I just wrote a whole newsletter comparing fintech companies to 90s NBA players. Don't be terrified of making mistakes or typos. AI doesn't make mistakes or typos. AI will hallucinate, but it hallucinates in the most beautifully written and grammatically correct English you could possibly imagine. The occasional typo, the occasional error, the occasional, like, oh, I don't think that word is actually what you think it means, that just means you're human. People like that. Share your opinions and admit when you were wrong. One of my favorite examples of writing the newsletter was I came out really sort of strongly against something that was happening in the ecosystem, published the newsletter. I thought it was relatively good thinking. I got feedback from multiple people in my audience where they're like, I don't know that I agree. I kind of think about it this way or whatever. You might want to think about it here. So I dug into it more. I took their feedback seriously. And then the next piece I wrote, I was like, you know what? I got this wrong. I actually think I'm completely 100% wrong about this. I'm changing my mind. And the thing that was so cool about that was I got like a dozen emails from people being like, hey, I love that you changed your mind. No one ever changes their mind. That was great that you changed your mind. We're all just learning in this ecosystem. So have opinions, but have strong opinions weakly held. Be willing to change your mind. Also, to the extent that you're comfortable, be personal. This is a scary thing to do. It's the scariest thing about writing content on the internet is being in any way personal or vulnerable. Everyone has a different line about this, right? Some people share everything about their lives. There are influencers online who are like lifestyle influencers, and literally their content is their life fully unvarnished. And you see their kids, you see their house, they share their intimate struggles about what's happened in their life. That is a form of content that is very powerful. It's not for everyone, and it's not even necessarily appropriate in a business context. But in my newsletter, I talk about my kids. I talk about my wife. I talk about things that are happening in with my various sports teams that I root for, both the joys and the sorrows. And I try to expose as much of my personal life as I'm comfortable with. I never use my kids' names. I don't give out any personal details, but I share things sort of in the abstract because I want people to know I'm a human who gets distracted by things and has opinions and has beliefs. And the parasocial relationships that form in that way are very powerful. It's another way to distinguish yourself from AI. I am a person. I have a family. I live in Montana. These things matter when you're consuming content. Last thing related to that is don't be afraid to share your feelings about the wider world occasionally, right? We're not robots that can just ignore everything that's happening in the world. Some of the most profound interactions I've had with subscribers through the newsletter have happened when I've written about what's happening in our politics or some current event that happened in the world. And you get a little bit of pushback from some people where they're like, hey, just shut up and dribble. I just want you to focus on fintech. I don't want you to talk about politics or other things. But I tend to ignore that feedback. I don't do it all the time, but when something really is bothering me, I will write about it because I want people to know I'm a human. I have feelings. I am not a robot. And again, that just strengthens the relationship that you have with your audience. And I think it's a reason why, actually, to be candid with you, I think there's a lot of people who read the intro to my newsletter, but don't scroll all the way down through the entire thing. And that's fine because at least I'm maintaining that relationship with them. And a lot of that is a parasocial relationship as much as it is about the content and my analysis. Last lesson, be patient. This is a screen grab from Substack, where I used to publish my newsletter, showing the first, couple of years of growth with the newsletter. And you will notice, if we were to zoom in, you would notice it even in more sort of minute detail. It took a while. The first, 2-3 months of writing the newsletter was almost entirely just me talking mostly to myself and my parents, who were my first subscribers. Then a couple people came in and it was like a little small club. And then a few more people trickled in. And then you hit these different inflection points where it's like, oh, wow, suddenly we jumped from 200 subscribers to 800 subscribers. Wow, we just crossed 1,000. It takes forever to get to your first 1,000 subscribers. And then you're like, oh, now that I've gotten to 1,000, I'm sure I'll get to 5,000 right away. Well, no, maybe not. Maybe it takes a while to climb up that, but then you get to 5,000. Before you know it, you hit 10,000. We're at 60,000 plus right now. It's entirely possible that we will never be that much bigger than we are right now. And that's fine. I have a great audience filled with high value folks who trust me to be a part of their inbox on a 3 times a week basis. That is plenty. I might not ever get to 100,000. I certainly won't get to 500,000. There's not that many people who care about what I write to fill up 500,000 people. That's totally fine. You have to be sort of comfortable with whatever the right size of what you're doing. If you feel like you're doing it well, there's a right size to everything, and you're not going to know what that size is until you eventually sort of hit that wall, and you have to be sort of comfortable with the journey to get there. I will also say, as a side note to this, it's really, really important to not obsess over metrics. One of the worst things I think you can do writing a newsletter or publishing a podcast, which we also do, is to obsess over like how many people listened, how many people downloaded it, how many people clicked. Oh, these people unsubscribed. One of the worst features of Substack, and you can turn it off, thankfully, is getting an email notification for every single person who unsubscribes. That is just brutal and counterproductive to the type of mindset you have to do this. And so, it's useful every once in a while to pull up and kind of take a step back and look at the metrics and see how things are performing, but don't obsess over it on a daily basis because it really is counterproductive. This is a craft that you're doing for the craft of it. And if people want to come along for the ride, all the better. So with that, Rick, I'll turn it back to you. That's everything I have.
That was incredible, my friend. That was incredible. It's not every day that you get somebody talking about his letters who's actually making it happen. I love the points that you brought to the table. We are coming close to the time of our lesson, but we do have still have a little bit of time left for Q&A in case anybody wants to drop some questions in the chat. While we give everybody time to do that, I do just want to mention that the recording from today's lesson is going to be shared with all of you on Monday, so you can look forward to that in your emails. And we had some questions that was sent in beforehand, so maybe we start with those while we give people time to get started. And one of those was actually related to the AI conversation and what you and I were actually talking about before we even jumped in. What this person's pretty much asking is, do you have any AI tools that you would specifically recommend for somebody who is trying to start a newsletter, but it's a one person team instead of a company?
Yeah, it's a great question. We were talking about this before we started recording. I think Claude Cowork has become really, really powerful in terms of being an agentic system that you can build different agents or different tools to help you with things. And so I guess what I would encourage you to do is AI can be an amazing accelerant, but it's not something that you want to use to build your workflows. And so my experience, and it's colored by the fact that I started the newsletter before we had all these wonderful AI tools, but I would hope that I would do it the same this time now as well, is build your workflow by hand. Do everything yourself manually the first time. And then spend some time refining it and figuring out what works, what doesn't, what the audience is responding to. And then as you start to scale up and you start getting more people subscribing, and maybe you want to add another newsletter or another send or change the frequency, then you can go in and figure out, okay, where are the bottlenecks that I have in my process? And where can I apply, whether it's Claude or ChatGPT, or there are some more sort of built for purpose newsletters. Like I like Granola for like keeping track of calendars and recording notes when I'm having conversations with people. You can figure out where to plug those AI tools in to unblock yourself and to become much more efficient. But you won't know what those areas are if you don't sort of build the initial workflow and process kind of manually and by hand.
Definitely agree with that. Definitely agree with that. Got to be careful not to use AI as a kind of a little bit of a crutch, right?
Yeah, because it'll guide you in a direction that is the same as everyone else, right? Like we have to remember with these AI tools, they are trained to be the collective wisdom of all of us, as scraped from all the things we've ever written on the internet. So AI always is an average of what everyone does, and so if you ask it for advice on, hey, how to start a newsletter, it's going to be helpful and it can help unstick you on certain things, but it's also going to give you the very most average answer, middle of the road answer. And if you just follow those pieces of advice literally without ever diverging from it, you're going to end up with a newsletter that averages out as a C, not as a B plus or an A, which is what you want.
Very true. Let's see. Joe is asking, what would you consider the ideal number of items to include in a newsletter?
That's a really great question. So I think it totally depends on the topic and your personal style. I've seen newsletters where, like, I'll give you an example. The newsletter I send out every Monday, we do 3 news stories. So it's like, what happened? What does it mean? What happened? What does it mean? What happened? What does it mean? So it's like 3 news stories, which is kind of the bulk of the newsletter. And then I do like 2 content recommendations after that, where I recommend other people's work. This goes back to the be generous advice. And then I end with 1 question that I want the audience to click reply to and send me a response and give me their feedback on. And we call it our 321 newsletter. That format works very well. It's very digestible and easy for people to kind of wrap their heads around. But it's just one of many different formats that I've seen work really well. Other people will do, you know, here's like there's a old, this wasn't a newsletter, but there's an old column that a sports writer I liked used to write where it was like 10 things every week on Friday, 10 things. Here's 10 things I noticed. So it can be 10. So I would say pick whatever kind of frequency or ideal number or format that you want that feels good to you and that feels like a match with the format and what you want to write about. And then sort of brand that and turn it into a thing. It's my 321 newsletter. It's my 10 things newsletter. It's my deep dive essay where I'm only going to write about one thing. That's what I do on Fridays. So I don't think there's any one right answer, but picking a format and then making that format sort of how you market the product to people so they know what to expect, that I've seen work really well.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. We are at time here, but we do have one more question that was sent in. I think it's a nice one to close us off. Do you have any newsletter pet peeves?
Newsletter pet peeves.
Yes.
Yeah, I sure do. So I think to me, the biggest pet peeve I have with newsletters is laziness. So if you always write the same thing in the intro to your newsletter, if it's clear in reading the newsletter that you just used Claude to scrape a bunch of things that anyone else could do, and then you just dropped it in there and sent it, I probably am more allergic to this than your average person. I subscribe to every newsletter in fintech, by the way. So I'm a massive newsletter subscriber as well as a writer. And the newsletters I value are ones where I can tell someone put time into this. And it doesn't matter what it is. Like it could be a beautifully written intro, it could be a really clever analogy, it could be these awesome images that they created. And by the way, they could have created it with AI, but it's clear they like iterated with AI multiple times to get the right image. But what I'm looking for is craft and time put into it. And laziness or shortcuts or things that just demonstrate like a real like lack of care, it's very disrespectful, honestly, because again, your position in someone's inbox is incredibly privileged, and it's a privilege that you need to take very seriously. And to show respect for your audience, I think it's important to not be lazy that way.
That's true. That's true. I mean, like the space in your inbox is like shelf space in a big store, right? It's
That's right.
competitive. It's tough to get there, and I mean, you just walk through the aisle and probably walk over a bunch of things and just look for the one you actually want to see. So, getting
That's
there
right.
deserves a lot of respect and work. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. This was an incredible lesson. Thank you, everybody, for joining us as well. We're just at time. Alex, do you want to tell them a little bit more about how to find you, how to find your newsletter before we close out?
Yeah, yeah. If anyone's interested in either fintech or the craft of writing newsletters, fintechtakes.com is where you can find the newsletter and subscribe. And I'm Alex Johnson on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you can find me there as well.
And we'll include links to all of that in the replay email as well. Once again, though, Alex, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for joining. We'll see you guys in the next micro lesson. Bye bye.
Thank you.